다들인데 근데 토마르 참으로야 나도 들리기 숨지자이.
First of all, today I would like to wish you all good morning and welcome.
다들이야. 다들인데 Monlam Gumushi that is Sunju Chanima, Tamar Chadiore.
So today is the last day of the teaching during the actual Monlam.
And I dream you that Kazan Honshu and Singi Energy Potowa Chilabri and Dari Dishi. Going to Shubado Jabwa Shumina and Satuyaji Karakavstados and another Dema Sum Nisumjimano Chiamane.
As I mentioned the other day, it's difficult for us to go through the entire long soliloquy by Potowa and to give everything an explanation. Up to this point, we've only gone through 2 or 3 pages.
And Digalia Arzuata Andari today in Justaneta, Chixiana, Tuzuchuna, the Lungi Sorochi, Terima, Lungi Sorojima, and Devesia, and Gans Terinde Yonge, Sanrolia, Tana, Kazue, Potowa, Chilabri Muki, Lungsamshi, and Gans Sanrolia, Tobina, and Rosam, and did as Tuzuchuna, Uzuru Chi, and Tuzumin, and Tashiskim.
And so I thought that if there is time, then it would be good for me to at least recite and give you the reading transmission of the long soliloquy of Potowa, because then at least you'll have the reading transmission of it. So we'll do that if there is time. If there's no time, there's nothing to be done.
다 당부 마 치료부름도 마티 되잖아. 발급되는 냠소녀와 지라에 닝네 랑도 치와 샤마지 되나 되네 천디 뢰통바지 온 최이 심마 샤마지 대른데 팅바이 람나 심바이 추용구로 추바이 연대께와라 측미 난게니레 상부지 예비 갱행이 노벌 민유버 추추신도 체 Shani Chigishia Shindu Chaba Wayin, Sendilla Loma Lona, Chipudi Chungshi She, Tiba Chimbo, Sangayi Gorshon, Nime Sunju do Gomja, Mika Tamalbada, Kizam Me.
And so to recite from the text, I have had some experience in the meantime. When you truly remember from your heart that you will die, you will be able to give up on this life. For the first time, you will have laid the genuine foundation for the Dharma. You have reached the beginning of the path. The water has entered the top of the channel. You will not have difficulty developing qualities. You will have a good internal cause for it, so you will be able to practice the Dharma properly, and adversity will be unable to impede you. You will be able to practice as taught in the Dharma. If you do not turn your mind away from this life, you may be able to explain everything found in Dharma texts, or enter the gate of the Mahayana secret mantra and practice unified non-duality, but you will not be any different from an ordinary lay person.
Dena Choshimbo, Zelhajigiga, Dena Tadaga Twenty Nimbutiva, Giburum Jing, Tasum Sumbayin, Tia Sendila Lolone, Chimangan Song, the Dungan Jibi, Churchabadi, Gibu Chunga Indi, 대규래 개베 최를 티베 자마 민족 지리시나 개시지라 잠도 심제라 소베 전제슈니 치 개시되라 그니 로베 미세라도 로베 채는 미창 냠네 상어다 신식이 대규기 로베 미남치나 녜텔라 잠도 심제지를 머슈세 잠도 심제 최탐지기 자와임마다 마고와 임비 균 신도체
For this reason, Lord Atisha, summing up the essential meaning of all the scriptures, taught the three types of persons, the lesser, middling, and greater. Among those, the lesser type of person turns their mind away from this life and practices the Dharma from fear of the lower realms in the next life. But there is no way to bring people to develop with themselves even the qualities of a lesser person. This is because people make a dharmic connection, such as refuge or bodhicitta, with a spiritual friend, but later they will not call him their master out of respect. They think that if they call him their master, others will criticize them, so they keep it a secret. If someone asks them, "Isn't that your master?" they reply, "I only took refuge in bodhicitta with him." That is failing to understand that refuge and bodhicitta are the root of the entire Dharma, so it is an extremely grave fault.
단디 된다도 도로디 베 된다도 도로 셰비미나 안에 챈데로 로 마로나 드네 팽그마레스다 최세나 팽그마레스
To sum up the meaning of this, if we do not turn our minds away from this life, then practicing the Dharma will not help.
确不的穷谢谢说的话，穷谢啥的，很大的卡来啥呢？那确个拿到了，卡来谢也不的，苍毛老叔叔谢心给也不难呀，凭个嘛来是。
As it says here, you may be able to explain everything found in Dharma texts. And so what this means is that you may know how to explain everything that is taught in all of the different Dharma texts, but it will not help.
근데 다나 신기 최고다 남자 랑신기 겹세세서 말하면 다지 랑신 자에게 배 겹려야 최고다 남자 깨네 다 진짜지기 최고 남자 괜데봐 되게 팽가 많았어.
And you may wear the outer and upper Dharma robes, the robes of the great beings. You may wear these upper and outer Dharma robes, but even this will not help you.
근데 상아 라메기지 기름다 조림라 사베기 람림번이 디베 게게 수수 gen고 찾아봐도 고민되베 이네야 타메바 최고로 머슈바다 제발 메스.
Additionally, you may practice the two phases of the secret mantra, the creation and completion phases, and practice these until you become quite old, but this will not help at all.
다디 개발 맵이 균신 찐 라비미나 균신 가르레스 대시 조시 라비미데 균신 가르레스나 쉐바 이민사데 챈딜라 로마로 아 진짜기 개발 제거가 임바래 단단한 지 쉐베기 쉐바 이민사 가만으로 자위나 다디 챈딜라 로마로 거네 챈제거가 임바래서.
And so you will not be different from an ordinary person. And the reason why there is no difference from an ordinary person, because what determines whether or not you are a Dharma practitioner is whether or not you have turned your mind away from this life. If we were to be able to measure whether you're a Dharma practitioner on a scale, we would have to measure whether or not you have turned your mind away from this life.
파르타살라 지 최체베 룽저지 최체베 지 춘저지 예베인비냐 된도 나와 되메바 수수 깔래게버도 된다면 배나 미규를 출 tru이다고 다 들리지 차려.
So if you do not turn your mind away from the Dharma, then on the outside it might look like it might look as if you're practicing the Dharma. But in actuality, all of the difficulties that all of the hardships that you undergo are pointless. It is like chasing after water in a mirage.
Today in Hindustane, da Potowa Korangi Gombaina, Tinsangi Chue Nyamne Chinge Tisolo Patayo Hindustane. Tarbata Tanchi Kembe Gomba Toya Pasit Suseris. Niendu da Rangsangi Gomba Toya at Toyu Pasit Suseris, Shemago Pares, Mitopa Shemigo Pares. Something the Sumi to Kagyu Pasit Suseris. Demigu Chima Plada Mi Ludin Zam Toya Lang, turned to Nyan Genda. They topsare somebody. And
so what Potowa's opinion is if we look at the Dharma practitioners of this day, there's no need to mention anyone achieving liberation or omniscience. There's no need to mention anyone achieving the states of the listener arhats or the Pratyeka Buddha arhats. We don't need to mention that no one will achieve those. There's no need to mention even achieving the dhyanas and the formless states. There isn't even anyone who is seeking to achieve rebirth as a god or a human in their next lives, and no one who will achieve this.
Tati Jungzen Kares, Kyote Bene, the Sadami, Ludinsam, Tongue. 지 된도 얘기 민도시야 되게저디 한바 차버래 된기 말했어 라베미나 다텔 균생이에스 된다 균생이에스 된다 균생지에스 라베미나 딘사 추생겐 디즈나라 지 겨와 치망 예수순지 동해란 지별 로겐겐암 야나 겨와 치메 된도 삼로 동게 민도스.
Now you might wonder why he says this. I mean, it seems rather audacious to say that there's no one who's even seeking to become a god or human in their next lives. It seems rather too much to say that. But there's a point and a reason for saying this. And the point and the reason is that if we look at the people who teach Dharma these days, there isn't even, or the people who practice Dharma these days, there isn't even anyone who is thinking about freeing themselves from the suffering of the three lower realms in their next lives. They're not even thinking about what will happen in their next lives.
제가 디균자나 되네 지가슈에 예수숨도 드네 뉴산 디균자나 되네다 예수숨이 동해는 지대하사데 공부시란도스.
And the reason for this is that the actions that cause rebirth in the three lower realms are the non-virtues. And these days, all of those who uphold the teachings of Scripture and practice, who say that they're upholding the teachings of Scripture and practice, actually accomplish and put a lot of effort into performing unvirtuous actions. And so for this reason, it is very rare to find anyone who actually fears the suffering of the three lower realms.
And Dana Sing, Tiwa Chijun Sea, Tea, Desa Dunjong Wangi, Chijun Shabara Madobe, Yambe Tajidu, Tiwa Chungina, Be Tajidu Chungwa Ajida, Tiwa Chimboina, Kasbada, Desa Dunjong, Dona, Tiwa Chijun Sea, Tiwa Chimbola Dene, Tiwa Chungsha, Tiwa Chungul Dene, Tiwa Chimbosa, the Shaimbre. That day in Dustane, when an Aransola Debe Mina, 티부 총 년도다 랑게기 지 람냠술 내야 돼 나란솔로 뛰네 삼당비 티부 총 차야 티부 총 차려 티부 지 라는 메모르지 안다 너랑 나란술기 심규리야 티부 총이 람전에 다 규리 깨요라 제제 시에서 가라가고 싶지 않아요 제가 디균전 때는 어다 디스 티부 총을 쳐야 되지 마지 가서 다디 지 캐수를 치 니주를 치 근데 제가 매다 티부 친비 남냠 사람이 가사지라 티부 총을 쳐야 돼 아직 지나지 가로 중주를 차려 알아 다 이미네 알아서 때비면 티부 친비 쳐 차려
So when we talk about the Dharma of the Mahayana and the Hinayana, the greater and the lesser vehicles, they are presented as greater or lesser in relation to each other. In relation to the Mahayana, the Hinayana is lesser, and the Mahayana is greater in relation to that. And so we're presenting one as greater and one as lesser merely in relationship to another. And yet, in relation to ourselves, even the Dharma of the Hinayana, the Dharma that is practiced by the Arhats and Pratyeka Buddhas, that path is in relation to ourselves. It is not a lower vehicle. It is a greater vehicle. In fact, it is an unexcelled vehicle in relation to ourselves. If there is someone who has the practice of the Mahayana within their beings, then we could say that the Hinayana is lesser. But for those of us, we are not even able to develop the path of the Hinayana within our beings. And so in this way, we cannot really say that we're even able to practice the Dharma of the Hinayana. And so the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, is only lesser in relation to those who actually practice the Mahayana. They are not lesser in relationship to us.
게시해야 금들 게시해야 돼. 유용 아주 다지 게시해서 주사네 야지 게시 동하게 게시디 말해. 게시 동네 지 디그리 제 디게시디 말해. 금디 게시해야 돼. 게외 신인기 게시디. 게시해야 돼. 게외 신인 두미도 원하잖아. 게외 신인해야 돼. 치기가 두샤네. 아니 게시해야 차수 봐. 그래서 금디 게시해야 돼. 양지 아주 남주 기시 동안 기시에 많이 비체 아주 다지 람나팅인 더 기시 선한다 딱 한다 다지 아주 달라마도 차려래 다제자 라마 기시질 당부 잠주 동바슈 semge 동바슈 아슈니 시수 then lamam geweshini degi korangi debada tumbaru tsendige ji tsendibege 지금 debada tumbaru chira majuna dene telaya ngegi kongye lamayi kongye geweshini sgmin karresana tsendige twenyerle yamena lama de tezji geda shira medwa ji lama nyumjung rubjimina ta mishindalia 다 라마 팅에기 계획신이 예 라마 인슬람나 뭐 차원서 다디 라마디 디 중장도 깨라시라면도 세상 다디 예 라마 인라나 뭐 차원서네 아니 베 교란 라마 가르디디 베 상와체 시민도 야나 예 라마 인스민도 되는 미신다지기 콜기지티 다 공교란 라마 말베스 오마 교란 공급자는 지체를 쉬든지 제발 말해 계제 지원도 다 가르쳐서잖아 아다 라마 교사는 지 cam도 심게 잡마다 신나가 슈뇽메스라고도 가 말했다 다 가르쳐서나 야 라마 미스 라나 공에 라마 미스 라나 야 교라 담념을 해서야기 된제기 따지 지 민두자로 용아 도박견 디 캠프스임게 잠마도 간 슈주 마중스 된데라고 두었어.
And so here, it talks about when we make a connection with a spiritual master through, such as refuge, when we make a connection such as refuge or bodhicitta with a spiritual master. And a spiritual master here, this means a guide on the path, an individual who can guide us down the path. The Tibetan word is geshe. But this does not mean like someone who has achieved the degree of the geshe. It means like your guru or like a spiritual friend. So this is actually the word geshe is a contraction of the Tibetan word for spiritual friend. So this is what it means in this instance, the spiritual friend who guides you on the path or your guru. In any case, what it's saying here is if we take refuge and then bodhicitta vows with a particular guru or a spiritual friend, and then later we see that that particular spiritual friend for some reason doesn't really match our wishes or our desires for this life or our goals for this life, then we get a little bit embarrassed and we think to ourselves, oh, I can't say that that lama or that guru is, that he's my guru or my spiritual friend. The reason for that is that if we say that, we think it won't promote our interests in this life. Maybe the lama doesn't have a high enough name. Maybe they aren't popular enough. In any case, we become embarrassed to admit that this lama is actually our own lama, our spiritual friend, because they're too low or not well enough known. Because we get embarrassed, then we try to keep it secret, and then we refuse to even say, oh, this is my lama. And then if someone else says, oh, isn't he your lama? Didn't you take some Dharma teachings from them? Then you might say, oh, I only took refuge in bodhicitta. I didn't take any other teachings from them. At this point, it's like we're afraid to say, oh, this is not my lama, because that would be a violation of, we're afraid that might be a violation of Samaya, and then we'd get a bad name for saying something like that. So instead we say, oh, I haven't taken anything but refuge in bodhicitta from that lama. And so this is not good at all. When we say, oh, I only took refuge in bodhicitta, then this is not understanding that refuge and bodhicitta are the foundation or the basis of all the Dharma. Refuge is the basis of all Dharma, and bodhicitta is the basis or foundation of all Mahayana Dharma. It's an extremely grave fault of not understanding that they are the basis of all Dharma. And so when we say, oh, I've only taken refuge in bodhicitta with that lama, then it's as if we are not including refuge in bodhicitta as dharma. It's as if we are saying that they are not dharma at all, and this is no good.
Yang 가시기 최슈의 qabla 간지치게 됐잖아. 라마지 군도 최슈의 qabla 가르치게 됐잖아. 얘는 최슝겐 되기 라마들. 당에 교란자 최슈는 드그레스. 이나 미신다는 게 최슈선스 단에 밀라비아 나지 깨나. 근데 게 교사는 최슈 인스트. 근데 랑거들의 도스. 답변은 최슝게 저와 디게 라마들에 교란자 최슈는 드그레스. 이나양에 you need to promise you won't tell anybody.
There are also some people who go to a guru, to a lama, and when they want to take a teaching, they first ask the teacher, "May I take some Dharma teachings from you? But before I take the teachings, you have to promise that you won't tell anyone else that I'm taking these teachings from you."
다들 제가 수업에 다지기 라마다 로맨 제바디 다 캔사우든데 팅사 아들 니마가도 왜 주질이든데 라마다 로맨 제바 캔사우든데 망고도 없어.
And so this is a rather strange connection between the Lama and the student. And so because this is a time of the 5 degenerations, there are many such strange interactions between Lama and the student.
다마 무드운동이다. 녜니 춘지 슈지를 찌그레 잠을 윤대의 녜비 대진기년나 미니 냠바 샤다추 대나 첸딜 로로바데 뉴어도 청주스버 켈렘바 마워도디 대라야 첸디버 송암 냠 nga라네 두눕시나 지숙체 냠네 상편적인 뉴마템바야 마중데 최기 내탐제 대내 고 곰자자 대코나 채워 중 闲来呀，提出越多，越的5年的空了些呗，空俺的300吨呗，咱没中，俺样空了些菜，俺样空了1亩，哪儿难度苦力就没准呢，全忙不写个排名度。
To continue reading, I have found qualities in every word spoken by those from whom I have received Dharma. The only thought that has occurred to me is that I could never buy it for money. Thus, there are few who have turned their minds away from this life. Many say they are bodhisattvas, but I wonder whether really they are focused on this life. I think about what I would do if I were to die tonight and have never considered any ambitions for tomorrow or thereafter. Because of that, I have understood the critical points of Dharma. That alone is the greatest sustenance for meditation. I have thought it would be so for others too, but when I tell them, their attitudes have never been compatible with mine. They worry about me, and I get discouraged about them. Generally, if you do not have some conviction, even knowing a lot of Dharma will not help.
다들 당하라 중원에 전에 최내 세번 능신지 냠네 제밤 라렌 따르고나 다 가르 개치게 됐으나 당부디 개치슈도 가르했으나 라말리 개치하지 않았어. 람기 자와 신인 딘주 좀번 능신기 다 간다지 당부 가르 개치하 가르했으나 라말리 개치하지 매스.
And so if we want to practice the Dharma as it has been taught, then in the beginning, what is most important is that there is nothing that is more important than our Guru. As it is said, the basis of the path is the Guru. So at the beginning, what is most important is the Lama.
다딘산 배낭 아주지 아이폰 세아로보다 다 삼성 세아로보다 단단한 신기 가래디 지기 야 computer somewhere loglen damage nyoe kawliya nga che ta se mang bu chho ta ko le gb ka zen do ram ka ze do kare za di ga ka zo di size ka ze yin ba ta mang bu sta.
So these days, when we go buy something like an iPhone or a Samsung phone or a computer, then we really check it out carefully. We see how much memory does it have, how much RAM does it have, what size does it have.
다디 카바르티즈 지체는 다 로징이지마도 배주동아요 말. 로징이지 배주동아 잘라래. 다 될라양 아주 갈라 간sam을 보지 딱지 신 될레베 도나로 쉽제지 아주 딱지 지야.
Now, a phone is something that we're going to use for a year or two. But even though we're only going to use it for a year or two, we really examine it very carefully. We take a lot of interest and we examine it carefully.
다딘산 별이야 키디즈 오마에는 벌급질 키디즈 공시비지 파르소아. 다딘산 키디즈 디즈 공차는 따디즈 공처 친주스도. 제자 따 nga chunju ka ta den de khashi nyonggen de ta nyo ya ko ni zu de sing ge de ta nyo de sa ne ang bo ko kha la ta so de zo la ta de ni jab la ta ye la ta yo la ta ta chang ma lo ta je chen ga shui mang bo ji ta je mang bo che go ma da lam sa ji de ta ji tong a zam ge de nyo go yo ma.
So these days in Tibet, for a while there was a period when dogs got to be very valuable and the price of dogs was very high. Now the price of dogs have gone down, but the price of horses has really gone up. And so when you buy a horse, if you're buying a horse, I know a little bit about this from when I was young. Anyways, when you buy a horse, you first, you open their mouth and you look at their teeth. You examine their hindquarters. You look at them from the right, and you look at them from the left. You examine them all over before you buy them. And so you have to check out the entire horse. You don't just buy a horse as soon as you see it.
다 오늘 제가 등산 두줄라지 취재 뒤로를 진짜 딸 배주시라야 말았다. 다 이내 지금 미카지 딸 거버여야 돼 봐. 다 근데 뒤주기 냐대야마도 배주시랑 오만은 배주시라요 말에. 근데 이메이네야 따라 가버용에 뒤주기 안 딸이야 배. 딸녀요 돌아간다. 딱제 먹고 세지. 요거요. 공 침보제지 요거요.
So these days we're actually in a technological era, and there's not a whole lot of use for horses anymore. And yet there are people who like horses, people who keep horses. And so even though people will keep horses, they don't actually have a whole lot of use for horses. And yet there are still people who will come and buy horses, and when they do, they examine them carefully, and they often pay a very hefty price for those horses.
다 라마사데 근데지. 라마사데 오늘 전에 교환되네 전수 마도게 바르다. 지 수수기 응권다 짬내 되지 샤데. 다간다 르기 다고 세는 장도. 응권다 짬내 세는 장도. 간다르지 니신이게 레드 차사로 되지 차대요.
But when we think about a guru is actually our refuge and protector from now in this life until we achieve enlightenment. We can say that the guru is the lord of our family, our refuge and protector until enlightenment. We can say that it is the guru who will bring us to understand our suchness.
Today in Hindustan, lama di kivu thamba yime libar takje cheni jamne shugwadi kechum chade.
And so for that reason, it is important for us to first examine that guru to see whether or not they are a great being before we ask them for refuge.
딱제 맞제비체 당보 딱제 맞제비체 라마 ten 다 드네 치수 라메 로마 루용두산에 룽겐데 망고 용디 아레스 다디 초진네 라메 귐레라 초진 로메 귐레스 라마르 룬데체네 지 가르죠 룬뷰 대바체네서는 나도 몽데체 제비 귐 자데요 아레 제산 디 귐디 라마 지부 귐마이마 아 라마데 땡긴게 로메 귐 차데.
And so if we do not examine the Lama, and then after a little while, what happens is that the Lama and the student fall out. There are many situations that happen such as this. The Lama doesn't really examine, the Lama and the student don't really examine each other. And if we think about this from one perspective, it's the Lama's fault. From the other perspective, it's also the student's fault. And it's like it's a foolish situation. It's as if we haven't really examined the Lama, and for that reason we have foolish or we have blind faith in the Lama. And so this is not just the Lama's fault, it is also the student's fault.
배나다기 권시변한 신 아주지 카바르지 유에나야 다지 제고도 아주 도나 제고도 다 이네 라마 덴주상 아주시라 다지죠 제상 알아서 처베 라마다 카바르니 개치중 참자 가랭이 하고문도
It's as I mentioned, when we buy a phone, we really examine it very carefully. And yet when we're going to follow a lama, we really don't examine the lama very carefully. And so sometimes I wonder, we have to think about what really is more important to us, the phone or the lama.
다는 아주 등산 consumerism 제주의 정로 다르게 차대비 내가 인도산에 아주냐 장랑지 당시 때 가르사나 배나 폰지 니어봐 때 배주시라 야보면도나 파군 욕저신 다키즈디 가바란딩에 공원점부터 있는데 키즈 배주장에 야보면도스 아 컴퍼니들 총관들 욕저시셔 제상 아주 뒤삼로 텐드립지 코어체 수수인 게 먹을체 라만르지 당보지 다제 맞지 라마지 때아 디제라 라마티 로마트 루용두산에 람삼베제 라마텔라 크리티사이스는 다도 배견을비체제 제가 참정 아주기 지 가르소에 수수긴 겐쿠르네 그 뒤에 지 비게 지 컴퍼니들지 초반들지 민들지 녀터셰서에 좀 된대 아마다데 당부의 수수인 겐쿠르 아 라브라도지 라마테아사데 배는 쳔딜레다 직전에 라마들 녀터셰쇼르데 쳔치마 과녀르샤도 갈라카브로 드네 인두산 디균센 때네 다 간다 지 가르소에다 지 푸경을 미역이 삼로시 당한체 수수인 겐쿠르제 아니 따지셔 봐야 돼 개좀 차례
And so when we buy something, these days it's a consumerist era. And because of this consumerist era, now we've gotten into a really bad habit. This bad habit is that when you buy something like a phone, and then later, if it doesn't work very well, you go back to the store and you complain. You say, it doesn't work. I paid a lot of money for this phone and it doesn't work. You complain about it. And so in the same way, when we follow a lama, we don't take responsibility ourselves. We do not examine the lama and then just follow the lama anyways. Later, when we fall out with the lama, if it doesn't work out well, it's like then we criticize the lama. We say it's their fault, it's that problem. Instead, we need to take responsibility for it. It's not like there's always someone we can lodge a complaint with. We can't always complain to someone. First of all, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. When we decide to follow a lama, we have to take responsibility because maybe there will be someone we can complain to in this life, but in the next life it will be very difficult to find anyone to complain to. And so we have to take a very long-term view, and it is important for us to take responsibility and examine the lama ourselves carefully.
단도나지 라마 상부 있는 저 라마 녀바 있는 저 단도는 륜대샤야 말았어. 딱제전 다신 제네 다간다 되네 가수의지 남주든 때문에 관에 가들 딱제체네 얘는 대바치고 그래서 구성도지 연대라 다네 이체바시 충분히미나 아니지 미도베 대바스는 라도 미초베 대바스하러 된지지 기려야 됐어. 대 맞게 봐도 무구 공부의 연도도 라마 주구의 연도도 제한 상황로 지 담낭레스 다데 디스펜토 말스 지남주점레스 다 간다 근데 지금 은혜 전에게 랑게 심규리아 인공 리베팅네 간다 구송토레 지 다신 제베 이체베 대바치 공식이야.
And so whether the lama is good or whether the lama is bad, we should not follow the lama out of just foolishness. We must examine the lama well. We must use our own intelligence to examine the lama, and then we can develop faith. We can develop faith in the lama's qualities of body, speech, and mind. And this is the faith of confidence. This is the irreversible belief. This is the belief that cannot be taken away from us. If we don't have such faith, and instead we just pretend to be devoted, we pretend as if we are doing guru yoga, then this is not actually all that much beneficial. It's just on the outside. it seems like it is devotion and guru yoga, but it is not. It is just artificial, it is just superficial appearances. And so what we need to do is really, with fortitude deep within our own beings, we need to examine the Lama and the Lama's body, speech, and mind, and then develop the belief in, and then develop the faith of true conviction.
이내야 나 딱지 지사 측디 기지셔요 주사네 아 미망 못지기 3년 나라라 다 인지게 misunderstanding 거지 양배 지 고알 로버를 지내야 하는 거예요 딱지 지스는 지민지 균장가 세네 배 가르쳐지 밀리비 차경가 쳐주스고 말아 딱지 지스 주사네 지 리베 차 간제도 그봐 조데다 리베 차라고 간제도 균장가 chen 미기베 지 청주체야 미기베 균옹주체야 지 균매나야 균소하로지 된지지 깨자 말해 간다지 밀려야지 미시 딱 간다라 강사들지 리베 찬도다 민도 조지 릭샤네 삼도아 다디 개점이 있어 말아 딩사망 뭐지 다지 지스들 더둑은 지부들려야베 미디 두자나 경가 인데 아마도 미디 야부 인데게 딱지 제변 저걸 미하고 통된게 시라라 매딩에 수시. 근데 이제 다 딱지 지세야 돼. 랍미병에를 차로 삼삼. 다 딱지 맞게 가서는 딱지 제외 쉬고래. 미상만도 누가 경가만도 야가 통화 매딩에 그렇지. 근데 차리 거. 다디디 딱지 지란데 노로 인지를 삼천게. 근데 가시 그래 가시 근데 용어로 받아 그 가르스게도 그 가르시게도 배 따네 정말로 받다지 배지 교육장가 체네 그 가르시게도 그 가르치게도 가르쳐다 가시지 간조네 근데 뭘 네 친구들이 알아 배는 대단한데 유기를 좋아도 내 유기지 내가 가르치게도 내가 가르치게도 아 따댕이는 이제 유기를 다 이미 디지털에서 편통한다 아주지
But when we say examining the guru, I think that the way many people think about this actually is a bit of a misunderstanding. And that's because when you say examining the guru, then these days what people think is that means we should look for the problems, we should look for the faults, we should look for the things that are bad. And people then forget that we should also look for the good aspects. Actually, when we're examining the Lama, the Guru, we should look for the good aspects. We should look for their qualities, not only for their bad qualities. It's like when when we're examining a Lama, we're seeking out their faults and their problems so much that we even see faults and problems where there are no faults. Instead, what we really need to do is we need to look at the good aspects, the good parts of the individual. We need to look and see what their good parts are. Otherwise, these days, when we say we're going to examine someone, examine a guru, then ultimately what happens is that means we say we're looking for the bad things. We're looking for the faults and the problems. And then there's not much benefit to actually examining. So sometimes when we talk about examining the guru, I actually wonder whether it's better to tell people, don't examine the guru, because if you examine the guru, you're only going to find the bad things, and you're only going to see faults, and there's actually no good that comes of that. And so I think that the way that we examine gurus these days is mistaken. And so when we say, examine the guru, there are people who think that that means you have to look at what is the guru saying, what is the guru doing, looking for faults. In fact, I think there are probably even people here who are doing this now who are looking at what I'm doing and saying, examining in that way. And I don't think there's much benefit to that.
Yeah, that ring to stand at Lama Jubam, Lama Nenju Chesadi, turned to that country Lama di Gusung to Indiana, that's his chene, and each of a Chumbaina, Lama Juba Sadi. 다 지 오늘전에 전대 준준도 정도 알았어. 근데 마치 팅상 라마 주바 인생 가르쳐 드리도잖아. 옴 배장구로스다. 온배장고로스라 디기드바 아니 민주니 배나 벽에는 온배장고로 저시 아홍스다 라마디미는 저시 쓰게나 온배장고로 저시 아홍스 제 녀바장대로 야 지게는 버지나 온배장고로 다잭 아홍스라고나 하라고 다들지 아니 재미도 지면 엄마 배장고로 딱 간다 지지지는 지 차화홍스 지바 루지 아홍스 근데 장가 번년번 되는 참 담네 데데도스 다들 야부 말았어 라마는 이제 얘기하면 지 건중만就是랑수체 지 수수기 지연 지 라면에 좀 담면도 지 수수 랑수체 담면도 쇠네 지 담면도 된대야지 편하고
And so when we do Guru Yoga, when we're practicing the Lama, when we're doing Guru Yoga, then in actuality what we should do is we should examine the qualities of their body, speech, and mind, and then develop conviction. Once we have that conviction, only then can our Guru Yoga really become authentic Guru Yoga. If we don't and we try to do Guru Yoga, what happens these days is that there are people who make the mantra, say Om Vajra Guru, and then they insert the name of the Guru. They put it in the middle. So if they're Tibetan, they say Om Vajra Tashi Ahong. And if they're English speakers, then they say Om Vajra Jack Ahong. And if they're Chinese speakers, then they say Om Vajra Chao Hao Ahong. And so they just make this up, and they make up a ritual, and they go on retreats, and they spend a long time reciting this new made-up mantra, doing this artificial practice, and it's no good. You know, this is practicing the Guru Yoga doesn't mean that we make something up and do something new. So I really wonder, you know, if these days doing these retreats and doing this Guru Yoga for some made-up Guru Yoga I don't think that doing any of these things is much benefit.
다 포도와 코랑 수나스 포도에서 가르 수어라스나 예 라마 탐바 마인반 최슈 마뉴스 당고데 라마 탐바 마인반 최슈 마뉴스 다가나 신기 라마 탐바 레지 군드니 최 나레스 말 최베 이 치수 제반로지 최 치수 제바 잠 휴제라 단 정규기 녀모의 띵도 지你不定就越不记得，你人有个牛毛定的就本就越不记，马到别个，那这个，让这个确实的被卡些钱，被确看了小那什么的，看了嘛些啊，那么差的，现在这个呀差没有事，确实的些呗，确实些呗就不平了嘛，那边拿了呀，俺是韩国就不平了嘛。大家那是去的看的嘛，做剧面呗，写些呗，平时们都是。但是去啥的，让给新剧了，叫些吧，这个。去到看上你不的，这平时大家的这去到我们这边都，听这些平时这里啊，这个说些吧，那是苦东西。去剧了叫啥的，花的看的都是啥呢？去呢看书么的。아니 소수기 심규라 냠솔레 라렌다 tel야 최 규르 저와사.
And so what Potowa is saying here is that he has never what Potowa is saying here is that he has never taken Dharma teachings from any master who has not been a great being. And when he has taken these Dharma teachings from the masters, he's found value in every single word, or even if they only taught a single verse, he has found value in it. And that means that what he has been able to do is he has been able to take even a single word or single verse that they say and apply it as an antidote to the afflictions in his being, to heap them on top of the afflictions as an antidote. The Dharma is not just something that we say with our mouths. It doesn't help us to just say it orally. Dharma isn't just something that we talk about. It isn't just something that we understand in our mouth. Dharma isn't something that, no matter how much Dharma we can speak about orally, it's not going to be beneficial to us. Dharma is something that we need to incorporate into our own beings. And what that means is that the Dharma and the individual need to mix together like adding milk, like combining milk and water. So when we say that we need to incorporate Dharma into our beings, then what is important here is that whatever Dharma it is we are practicing, it is we are able to actually bring it into and practice it within the continuum of our mind stream. That is what it means to practice the Dharma.
다가나 최당 강사사 강사스도 가르쳐서는 최사의 아주 냠내 지하기 다간다 지 된다로 될 최사 다 냠내 지규 될 최사 냠소 랭게기 밑에 강사사 단도는 냠소 랭규 최대다 냠소 랭게기 미니버디 버루리아 파타 매바스나 다도 간다를 훈이 지질을 징대르지 최 냠소 랭게스도 산에 최근남 최스도 산에 지 소도여지 냠소 랭게스도 소도여지 냠소 랭게 최스도 파주데 베제 나로래야 유대바 잠시체 냠소 랭게스도 디치로들래야 지 미착고지 여지 다 군이 버로를 자는 대바자는 매치 가르쳐다지 최니 셰딩에든 다 간다지 셰대야 되다 냠슬랭게 버로드 미들 케바 침부시다 이르지 근데 차비나 근데 최냐면 잡았어 봐
So there is the Dharma and there is the individual. The Dharma is what we are practicing. And then the individual, the one who is doing the practice, is the individual. And so the Dharma that is practiced, and the person practicing the Dharma, actually, there should be no gap between the two. It's like the two should mix in with each other. The Dharma should be the practitioner. And yet what happens when we practice is there's the Dharma that we are practicing, and it's like that is over there, outside. And then there is the person who's practicing who's over there. And then in between the two of them, there's like this distance, there's this gap. It's like there's the Dharma that is being practiced, and then there is this solid person on this side, and there's no relation between the two. And so when we practice, there is the Dharma that is taught, and then there is the person that is practicing, and there's this big difference between the two of them. And if that happens, then we can't really practice the Dharma.
다베나 냠술랭 유체의 인지 로지 인주체 인지사의 심전 탐지지 동해다 템 찌마로 삼삼게 된지기베 로쩨마 메인바 세나라도 된지기베 로베 가르지 원하는 닝타와는 된지기 텐데아지 인지스요지 다수스데는 인지 냠레지 된게 가르서 공도 잡고 심전 강알로지 동해 총의 찌마로 삼댕에를 된지예나 다 군인이 따다대마서 냠소 랭겐기 가사데 심전탑도 동해 총의 찌마로 삼댕에를 지여비세 냠소 랭주체의 심전탑도 동해다 태나 찌마로 냠바를 된지 고고예베 군인 루도야미노 되게 차소나 되게 다 최다 가사니 바르다 예베 띵도 최다 가사니 경계 차소
For example, if the Dharma that you're practicing is compassion, what compassion is, it's the thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if all sentient beings, or what would be wrong if all sentient beings were free of suffering? And so having that thought is compassion. But then you've got the person who's practicing the Dharma, and maybe the person who's practicing the Dharma is someone who's rather irritable and easily angered. Someone who thinks, no problem if everyone else is suffering. Who cares if anyone else is suffering? And so the individual who's practicing is saying, who cares if anyone else is suffering? The Dharma that's being practiced is the thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if no one was suffering? And these two are just completely incompatible. There's like no way they can get together. There's the Dharma and the individual, and they're completely incompatible with each other.
당에 망부시다 슈메 다 대점시네 근데 가수지 아들이 보도와디 치료를 대점시 참시하기지 롱시란 데야 뒤수민도.
And so that is enough for right now on the long soliloquy of Potowa. I don't have time to give the transmission of that now.